All right. Hello, Lauren Brown here. Thanks for joining me with Kara. As promised, Kara and I wanted to complete the confidence with calculation session where we just ran out of time at the last minute. And Kara was kind enough to stick with me, and we're going to go over wedge angle, hinge angle, and average life of an isotope. Before Kara gets into it and walks through it with us, I wanted to take a minute and explain who I am. Maybe you haven't met me yet. My name is Lauren Brown. Hello, I'm a radiation therapist of 16 years, and I am passionate and have a desire to help radiation therapy students pass their board exam. And I'm joined here tonight by Kara Lehman. She is our expert tutor, but not only is she an expert tutor, and she's helped 7 radiation therapy students pass their boards, and she's also a dosimetrist working full-time at the Maryland Proton Center, and works also as a radiation therapist in whatever spare time she has to continue the patient interaction, to stay fresh in her skills as a radiation therapist. So if anyone is qualified to help us with these matters, with these calculations that can seem so intimidating, it's Kara. Thank you, Kara, for joining us. Thank you for this extra bit of your time to go over these equations with us. I'll let you take it away.
All right. Yeah, sure. Thank you for the introduction. I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started with these problems here. But just to reiterate, we just have 3 different types of problems left. So I'll start with wedge angle, then move on to hinge angle, and then finish with the average life of a radioactive isotope. So to begin with wedge angle, I will begin by writing out the formula. So it's wedge angle. So I'll just put W and then this little like angle sign equals 90 minus the hinge angle in parentheses. So I'll just put hinge angle divided by 2. So you might be saying, what is the hinge angle? But the hinge angle is really just defined as the difference between the 2 gantry angles. You will get, like, typically it'll either, the problem will just tell you the hinge angle is, and then you can simply just add that into the problem. No extra work needs to be done. But in this case, it gives you the 2 different gantry angles. So you'll want to just take the difference between those 2. And your answer should never be negative. So even if the 35 angle comes first and the 55 is second, just make sure you do 155 minus 35 or whatever gives you a positive difference, just because your answer should never be negative or you're not going to get. So can you still hear me, Lauren? Sorry.
Yes, I can hear you. You're doing great.
Okay. All right, sounds good. So in this case, I'll just down here, kind of like in the margin, just calculate the difference. So if you're to just do x equals 155 minus 35, you get x equal to 120. So that's what you can just kind of plug in for your hinge angle. So if you still do wedge angle equals 90 minus 120 in parentheses divided by 2. And I just put the parentheses there because with order of operations, you're going to want to do your division first before your subtraction. So then again, if you do wedge angle, it would equal 90 minus, and then 120 divided by 2 is 60. So then your wedge angle, if you do 90 minus 60, is 30. So then your answer in this, for this problem, is B, 30 degrees. And that is basically it for this problem. Is there anything you want to add to it, Lauren?
Yeah, quick question. For some reason, I guess I'm not super familiar with this, and I wanted to ask, so am I understanding this correctly? Like, the reason why we use this formula is to understand when there's two different fields that may require a wedge, this helps us to calculate what degree wedge to use. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So the degree of wedge to be used actually is dependent on how far away those two angles are. That's why it's important to find the hinge angle because that will help determine if you need a thick wedge versus a smaller or thinner wedge. So yes, exactly like you were saying.
And is it common in the board exam for them to, because I'm aware of dynamic wedges, but is it common for maybe the board to ask questions regarding very standard kind of wedges you put in the machine? What I'm referencing is I think of like 60-degree wedge, a 30-degree wedge, maybe a 45-degree wedge, and a 15-degree wedge. I feel like those were the very four standard angles that I remember working with when I was preparing for the board 16 years ago. But is that, or is it your experience that they might, because there's such thing as dynamic wedges, is it your experience that they will talk about any angle wedge? Because I guess you could have an infinite number of wedges, or maybe I'm not correct about that. Can you help me understand?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So yeah, what I have listed here, like A through D, is definitely the common like physical wedges. That if like the problem would say something about a physical wedge, these would really be the only options. But now with like the enhanced like dynamic wedging and things like that, there's a lot more wedge options. So I I would say the boards could probably ask a variety of any type of question just for the sake of, now being able to use more than just the standard wedges. Again, it's really not any more difficult, if you would calculate a wedge angle that's 25 degrees or something like that. Either way, you're really just subtracting the two hinge angles, and you're still, using the same formula. But yeah, otherwise, these would be the typical, but good question.
Okay. And then is it important to kind of keep in mind? Because as a therapist, I'm aware that certain orientations kind of lend themselves to certain types of wedges. Um, is it good to kind of like be able to kind of logically think through this? Like, oh, the board question gave me, said, it was a head and neck patient, and it's saying, it was a 30-degree wedge, with degree, gantry at 90 and 270, or maybe 280 and 80. Is there any kind of like logical framework, or basically it's so easy, just plug your numbers in and go?
Yeah, that's another good question. I can't think of like a scenario that they would ask other than, of course, like asking for like wedge orientation, which is like a whole different kind of problem and not really like math. It would be not really considered a math problem because there's not really calculation to do. But yeah, no matter what your angles are, there's really not too much of like a shortcut or a key to it. It's just there's just a few that like maybe you could memorize like any angle that's 90 degrees apart or yeah, 90 degrees apart. It would be like a 45-degree angle. Just, that's just something to have memorized. But again, that would just probably save you like a minute on the boards. It's probably better to just work out the formula instead of like trying to memorize the different hinge angles and which wedge angles go with each hinge angle. So yeah, there's really not like a anything like you're saying that I can think of.
Okay. I was just trying to play devil's advocate, as it's just solo. It's like tutoring Lauren here. But that's all the questions I have about wedge angle. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, if anyone wants to take a picture of the work here, they certainly can. I'll clear it and we can move on to hinge angle. So again, very similarly, The only difference here is, hinge angle is a slightly different formula. However, you can always, like, let's say you get to the boards and you can only remember wedge angle, but you can't remember hinge angle. You can always, flip around the formula and solve for like getting hinge angle by itself. So some people, tell me I'm not even memorizing both of them. I'm just memorizing one, and then I'll figure out the other formula from the other. But just to give you the formula for hinge angle, it's hinge angle equals 180 minus 2 in parentheses times the wedge angle. And again, you could figure this out from the wedge angle formula. But rewriting this, the hinge angle equals 180. And then in this problem, it says that there's a 60-degree wedge that's used. So you simply just put 60 degrees in for the wedge angle. And then again, the last step here to calculate this out, be 180, and then 2 times 60 is 120. So then 180 minus 120 is 60. So the hinge angle for a 60-degree wedge is 60 degrees, which is answer D in this case. And again, that's really all there is to it. It has to give you the wedge angle. There's no other way this question could really be asked. And that's like pretty much it for this formula. I think they really only give probably one or the other on the boards, and I think probably more commonly it's the wedge angle. But yeah, this is really it for the hinge angle. But just let me know if you have any questions on this.
Okay, like typical Lauren fashion, I'm gonna ask better understanding. So basically, am I understanding this correctly? Like the hinge angle is the angle between the two different gantries, or am I? And so in other words, there's two different gantry positions, say an RPO and an LPO. Is the hinge angle is the angle between that they make, that the two fields make at the isocenter, and you can calculate that when you're given the wedge for the LPO and the wedge for the RPO. Is that my understanding?
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, no matter what, you'll have two different gantry angles, and you'll just want to, take the difference between the two. And the hinge angle is, yes, exactly the angle that the two different beams make, depending on what degree that they're at. And then depending on that, a certain degree of wedge is the most helpful.
Okay, so to draw it out, it's like you have a patient here and they're on the table, and then you have, a field coming in like here, and then you have another field coming in here. And then there's like, I don't know the orientation of the wedge. I'm not really good at that, but there's a wedge here, and then there's a wedge like here. And so this is kind of the problem we start off with, right? So it tells us that we have a 60-degree wedge on, say, each of the two fields. And where they intersect at the isocenter, if you were to measure that angle, what would it be? Like, it's my theta. And so we're solving for this. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is in a sense. Again, it's really just the subtraction between the two gantry angles. So I don't know exactly what point, along this like triangle that it's made with the two intersecting gantries. I don't know exactly what point it's measuring, but really the hinge angle is just defined as like the subtraction between the two different gantry angle that's given.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I think I understand. So you could be given one or the other, but oftentimes you don't see this question on the board exam in both ways because it's just not that important. Like they give more emphasis on other topics, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think they kind of figure if you can figure out one, if you can figure out the wedge angle, you can probably figure out like in a dire situation the other by deriving the formula. So I think they probably only ask one, but it's good to know, both.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other questions on this?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Anyone can take a picture if they need, and I will clear the board. Let's clear it all. Okay. Then lastly, I'll move into the average life. And again, this isn't too complicated either, but just another formula that you want to have on your formula sheet just to know. But average life, so I'll do T av equals, and it's just 1.44 times the half-life of the radioactive isotope. So just another number to memorize, 1.44. But again, anytime you see that it's asking for average life, you can just make sure that you have the half-life. Again, another way that this could possibly be asked is it would say, find the radioactive or find the average life of an isotope and it might say iridium 192 and wants you to just have that memorized that the half-life of iridium 192 is 74 days. But you want to know just if it ever asks for average life, you just need the half-life of that radioactive source. So then you can just put 74 in here and then 1.44 times 74 average is 107. And so the answer would be A. But again, this is days here. So the only other way that they could also possibly say would be like if they would give you 74 days as the half-life, or let's say you memorize 74 days, but the answer is in some other unit like weeks or hours or something like that, you might have to use, a unit multiplier to convert the 74 days into whatever unit the answers are given in. So I would just say watch out for that. But I don't think they do that too much because the point really isn't to trick you with that. The point is that you know that to find the average life, it's just 1.44 times the half-life. So oftentimes the units match, but that would be the only other thing I would say to possibly look out for with this type of problem is your units. And then also just to know that sometimes they might not give you the half-life, but you will want to have it memorized or somehow look out for it on the test in another way that maybe it's given to you in another problem, and then you're able to use it. But yeah, does that make sense or any questions on that?
No, it seems pretty straightforward. I tried my hardest. I don't have one.
All right, yeah, it's very straightforward, not too much going on with this one.
So the key is really just memorizing the formula T, the average life of a radioactive isotope equals 1.44, which is some factor, times the half-life of that isotope.
Yep. Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up, right?
I think so. That's the last three that I have that I would say add into your formula sheet in order
Excellent.
to take the boards.
Well, thank you. Thank you for jumping on this short call with us, because that kind of really completes the Confidence with Calculations series that we set out to really deliver over the last 2 weeks. Kara's been kind enough to join us. She's for at least 4 hours total, I would imagine. And the amount of value that we received, Kara, is huge. And I really appreciate your time, your expertise, your tips and techniques. You guys, if you would please subscribe and hit the notification bell, as you'll be getting more videos from me as they're released every week, as we have more of these tutoring sessions with myself. And shoot, if you join my email list, you could be one of the students to participate. So you could go to laurenjbrown.com, sign up for my newsletter, where I help students, radiation therapy students specifically, pass their board exam. I offer helpful tips and tricks, as well as going through study lessons, free group study lessons, study sessions. Um, so um, that's all I have for you. Thanks again, Kara. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we go?
No, I don't think so. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.